In many modern Golden Dawn groups, the lesser ritual of the hexagram is used in the same way as the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. In other words, really, really badly, without any clear thought about what is trying to be achieved. In the Magical Order of the Aurora Aurea, we have a correspondence course, and we always get people trying to impress us by showing that they can do a battery of lesser banishing rituals, lesser banishing hexagrams, a supreme pentagram or two, and perhaps a middle pillar before they sit down and do something as basic as a meditation. Yeah, you only need a lesser ritual of the pentagram for that sort of thing, and anything else is redundant. Now, I've already talked about the lesser ritual of the pentagram and how it's been misused, so I'm now going to look at the lesser ritual of the hexagram and when you use it. Like the pentagram, the lesser ritual comes in two flavors, banishing and invoking, and like most things in the modern Golden Dawn, the banishing is used much more often than it needs to be. In fact, it's fairly clear from the original Golden Dawn texts that both of them should be used equally. Many people think the pentagram is used for just elements, and that the hexagram is supposed to deal with planetary forces, because planetary forces, man, are just so damn dangerous. This paranoia seems to come from Mathers, who says you should use the lesser ritual of the pentagram and the lesser ritual of the hexagram to protect your magic circle. The only problem is that he doesn't say which one and why. So, modern Golden Dawn people have claimed that the lesser ritual of the hexagram is all about limitation and freedom. This is because the lesser hexagram is based on the supreme hexagram of Saturn. After all, Saturn is the great limiter, so it makes sense that before a ritual you banish him to allow yourself to push back the barriers of your own personal limitations. And, like most questions to do with banishing and invoking within the Golden Dawn, you forget all about the invoking, even though Mathers gave it equal treatment. However, it's much more complicated than that, and it isn't based on planets at all. In fact, it's based on the Tree of Life. Especially something called Dart, which isn't even on the tree at all, but exists between Tifereth and Keter, and was seen by the Golden Dawn as a synthesis of all the supernal forces of Keter, Hokmah, and Bina. In fact, the Golden Dawn gave Da'at the divine name of Bina and the planetary attribution of Saturn. All this makes sense when you put a hexagram on the Tree of Life. Here you can see that the top of the hexagram connects to Da'at, and the bottom one links to the moon sphere of Yesod. So rather than looking at Saturn, the Saturn meaning, we're looking at a polarity between the spirit and the lunar forces of Yesod, with everything centered on Tiferet. Before we go on, it's important to see this in context. You did not learn about hexagrams until you entered the 5=6 grade. So this meant that you were comfortable with working on the astral level of Yesod. This was lunar magic, and you had to know what you were doing, and have some contact with spirit. This was not possible to an outer order member who was still trying to balance their elemental nature. There has been a move to bring inner order teachings, such as the lesser ritual of the hexagram, into the outer order of the Golden Dawn, but this diagram shows why it's impossible and is also unnecessary. There's also another confusion that modern, more literal GD people have in regards to some of these diagrams. They see planets being drawn on the points of the hexagram and assume they really were planets, when in actual fact they were shorthand for Sephiroth. Now, these did have planetary meanings, but they weren't the only meanings. What the lesser ritual of the hexagram is doing is bringing down spiritual force, causing it to manifest in the sphere of Yesod as a planetary force. Since most people's consciousness doesn't normally exist in the Yesodic sphere, they're not going to be troubled by these forces in any particular way. Their planets manifest as their astrological chart and their transits. But once a magician is an adept, they start to interact with these planets, and they need some symbols of control over them. You'll notice, however, that the lesser ritual of the pentagram has 4 forms, and this makes it more complicated. In fact, I'd go further to say that it means that it doesn't have much to do with planetary force at all, as this particular function was left to the supreme pentagram, which is a much more advanced and involved ritual. What it means then is the lesser ritual is supposed to be doing something else, and this function can be found within the 4 forms. Here are the banishing ones. I call these the broken hexagrams, but in reality they're still hexagrams. The top one is drawn in the east, and the conventional hexagram was drawn in the south, the third form was drawn in the west, and the last one was drawn in the north. You'll notice that the northern one is completely unlike the one in Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn book. This is because Regardie's version was a typo which remained uncorrected for years and was given as instruction by countless modern Golden Dawn groups who didn't know what the hell they were doing. The fact that this northern hexagram was and is still being used by Golden Dawn groups is one of the great face palms of modern magic. Mathers said the forms were based on this diagram, which was also not published in Regardie's book. While I can see this, it's somewhat confusing, and it's better explained just by looking at the different forms on the Tree of Life and seeing what they actually say. The first form is in the east. You can see that the first triangle has as its apex the top point and dart, and therefore represents the highest spiritual force. The top triangle is said to be fire. Now the bottom triangle, which is water, is flipped so that the top point is above the sun and on the path of Gimel, leading to Da'at. This is a symbol when the unconscious is elevated to its highest level of mystic possibility. Notice the sun symbol there? That's because this version of the lesser ritual of the hexagram is taken from a real Golden Dawn manuscript and not Regardie. It can be seen in my book, Mathers' Last Secret. But, in my view, it's the lost key to understanding this ritual. It shows where the sun is, and since the entire ritual is solar, this is vital. The next form is in the south and shows the lunar hexagram fallen to its correct place. It also shows the perfection of a perfected human with his feet on Yesod and his crown in Da'at. Now, this is not the normal human who will have fallen further down the tree, but the fiery, true human, capable of manifesting on most of the planes of the Tree of Life. This is commonly called the higher self. In the third form, the fall is continued, with a separation taking place between the lower water triangle and the spiritual fire triangle. However, this is an illusion, because the planets have not moved at all. What we're looking at is in reality the same hex as above, but it's working within the realm of illusion. Tifereth is a linking point between these two triangles. This is placed in the west and is commonly associated with water. In the fourth form, we're looking at something really odd. The spiritual or fire triangle is flipped and has become dominated by the lunar triangle. Spirit is effectively placed at the bottom of the Tree of Life, and thinking and life becomes dominated by the lower self. This is a statement of how earthly man works. And this begs the question, where are the planets? It's like the lesser ritual of the pentagram was not about elements. The lesser ritual of the hexagram is not about planets. Like the lesser pentagram, which said the statement, I am spirit ruling over the elements, the lesser hexagram is making an important statement to the universe about your humanity. You are saying you're a divine being in Hex 1, manifesting in all worlds, Hex 2, who has fallen into a world of illusion, Hex 3, and is spirit living within matter, Hex 4. Sure, the Supreme Hex ritual might be talking about the planets, but not the lesser ritual. So why would you use it? Well, the goal of both lesser rituals is to create a magic circle. In both cases, this is done by making statements to the universe. You are saying, I'm spirit ruling over matter. I'm a divine being who is in matter. And because you're divine, it means that the elemental creatures have to listen to you, in the case of the lesser pentagram, and astral beings have to listen to you as well, as in the case of the hexagram. So when do you use a banishing hexagram and when do you use an invoking? The two rituals are meant to work side by side, so when you're doing a banishing ritual, you would use a banishing pentagram and a banishing hexagram. This means that most of the time then you'll use an invoking pentagram with an invoking hexagram. The lesser ritual of the hexagram is simple. It is always done after the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Next, you draw the forms in each of the quarters. The form is always drawn with the fire or spirit triangle first. If you're invoking, start at the Saturn or Da'at point and draw the triangle clockwise. If you are banishing, start at the Saturn point and go anti-clockwise. The next triangle starts at the Moon point and goes clockwise if you're invoking and anti-clockwise if you're banishing. Once you have drawn your form, you draw the sun symbol in the center and vibrate the divine name Ararita. Once you have finished doing this, you return to the center of your circle and perform the Lvx formula. The Lvx formula is vital because it calls down light into the astral shells you have created and brings them to life. You have then performed the ritual. What is clear here is that we have not got the ritual we thought we had. It is still very useful, simple, and incredibly powerful, but is not the great force of planetary sterilization which we've been told for the last 30 years. I'm aware that people will not agree with this, particularly as I don't have much Golden Dawn paperwork on my side. However, this is not because Mathers and Westcott would not agree with me. It's because the paperwork by the Golden Dawn on the subject is sketchy. But given its partnership with the pentagram ritual, this gives the two so-called lesser rituals a meaning and a function within the Golden Dawn system. Otherwise, you might as well just leave it to the Supremes.